Vanessa then. And Vanessa, what is going on in the wider region of the Middle East at the moment?
Well, I did include a link to my Substack because actually when I was looking this morning for reports on what I'm going to talk about, I found absolutely nothing. Of course, not in the BBC and not at CNN and not in The Guardian at all. Why? Because what has been going on since the 7th of February, so for about the last 5 days, is that if we can just have a look at the map, the HTS terrorist forces have been leading attacks against Lebanese territory on the border, very close to areas like Qusair and Homs, that were traditionally, let's say, resistant strongholds and areas where weapons could be smuggled into both Lebanese and Palestinian resistance. Now, effectively, if we look at the photo, we can see that it was actually who was leading the attack, or what are known as Jolani's Red Band Brigade, Asaib al-Hamra, which is his elite forces, special forces, led the attacks on the borders, targeting farmland, villages, under the pretext of preventing smuggling, which of course had, when I'm talking about smuggling, we're talking about drugs and foodstuff and so on. But of course, it will become very apparent that in reality, HTS, as it always has done, is working hand in glove with Israel. We talked about the Gaza situation and the Palestinian situation in general. The border between Syria and Lebanon is 394 kilometers, 245 miles. HTS have effectively attempted to breach that border in the north, causing civilian casualties. But the interesting thing is the elite forces suffered enormous casualties at the hands of the tribal factions. Jafar, sorry, the dog has made an appearance now. Al-Maqdad and Al-Zaita tribes, which from the 5th century to the 18th resided in Tripoli and in Beirut, and then moved to the Bekaa region, which is that northeastern region on the border. So the tribes by themselves defeated what are effectively Jolani's elite forces. To the point where Jolani was calling for reinforcements from Idlib and from other areas of Syria, and also calling for a ceasefire. The Lebanese army in the last few days has stepped in and taken control of the border and sort of pushed the tribesmen back into territory further inside Lebanon. And I will remind you, because we're talking about Israel maneuvers, also last week we spoke about the 5 high points in the south of Lebanon that Israel is trying to maintain control of. There have been 1,350 violations of the ceasefire by Israel since December. And we have looming, of course, the date for the full withdrawal. Israel has been pushing the US to extend the withdrawal yet again, which is very typical of their tactics. But so far, the Lebanese government is insisting on full withdrawal by Israel on the 18th of February. Sorry, I'm losing track of months. At the same time as these border attacks are ongoing, this is in Damascus, in the southern countryside. Israel has been bombing what it claimed were Palestinian resistance weapons warehouses, which were in fact described by Syrian sources as being a building that was used as a clinic by the military housing complex that was in this area. And they've also been extending their military occupation into southern towns like Quneitra and Dara, and sending reinforcements to the Mount Hermon area, which is the highest vantage point on the border between Syria and Lebanon. They've established basically 9 new bases in the south. They've been sending the Golani brigades and various other specialist forces to the Mount Hermon area in collaboration, of course, with what HTS is doing. And gradually, HTS is extending the length of their operations along the border. And again, if we just have a look at this map. So here, HTS now has sent in the last 24 hours 700 Turkmenistani brigades and some Syrian extremist forces also to this area. They're laying mines a border in this area to prevent any incursions into Syrian territory. But as I said, they're also extending further down the length of the border. So combined with Gaza, here in Lebanon, we are expecting a serious escalation. I wanted to point out that all of this, of course, was going on during the formation of the Lebanese government under the newly elected President Joseph Aoun. And the U.S. envoy for peace in the Middle East, Morgan Ortagus, deputy envoy, came to Beirut and went to the Babda Palace and informed the president that they were very glad that Hezbollah had been defeated and that they would not like to see Hezbollah representatives in the government. This, of course, despite the fact that Hezbollah actually had the highest vote in proceeding to parliamentary elections. And ultimately, I'm very pleased to announce that the US, again, pressure on Lebanon failed, and 5 MPs were approved by Hezbollah and the Prime Minister. So Hezbollah and Amal movement between them, both Shia, are approved as Health Minister, Labour Minister, Environment, Finance, and as Administrative Development. So we're sitting on a powder keg at the moment. There's an awful lot of this going on. And as I said, they're being completely ignored in Western media, perhaps unseemly, while Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart are interviewing Jolani, or as he likes to call himself, Ahmed al-Shara, the self-proclaimed president in Syria.
Thank you, Vanessa. And just before we move on, do you have any thoughts on what Charles was talking about at the beginning of the program with Iran?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that we're ratcheting up at least aggressive rhetoric against Iran. Is that actually going to lead to some kind of escalation of military force? I don't know. Is it to put pressure on Iran and the reformist government to come to the table with the United States over, the nuclear deal? What is the UK going to do against Iran? That's the number one question that I have to ask. So for me, it seems to be pressure rhetoric. But yeah, all bets are off at the moment.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Now, in